Okay, we are going to create a video here today of how to use VCarve with our CNC router. If you've watched the VCarve to our plasma cutter video, this will be very similar. However, there are a few things we do have to take into account with respect to depth of cut, which we don't have to think about with the plasma cutter. So setting up the file will be almost exactly the same in terms of importing your geometry from Fusion 360. If you are unsure how to get a file out of Fusion 360, please see the video on the tutorial sheet for how to do that. Basically, we will be using a DXF file, and that can just be exported from Fusion 360. So this video will assume you have already exported your geometry from Fusion 360 into DXF format. Let's go ahead and get started. Here we have our VCarve software. You can only find the VCarve software on the computer in the machine shop. So you cannot actually do any of this stuff on your computers here in the computer lab. So once you open it up, this is what you're going to see. And in general, the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and click on Create New File. You'll get to your job setup. We'll do single-sided to start with. Job size is your material size, so the piece of material you're using for the cut. You know, the model that you're exporting may be a certain size, but then you're going to be cutting it on some piece of either metal or wood or something like that. This is representative of that piece of material, not your actual model. So you can put in whatever dimensions you want here, or not whatever you want, but whatever will match the size of stock that you're using. When using the plasma cutter, thickness doesn't really matter, but however, when using the CNC router, which is what this video is about, the thickness of your material will matter. Let's just pretend that we have a 1/2 inch thickness piece of material, and so we'll just keep it at that. Our Z0 position will be material surface, and we'll keep our XY datum to begin with here in the center. Make sure we also want it to be set to 0, 0, X and Y. That usually is the case. These last two options are just visual for this, what this looks like. This isn't a piece of paper. This is a piece of wood or a piece of metal, and you can make it look that way if you really wanted to. I'm not going to do that today, so if you would like to investigate that, feel free to do that. We'll click OK, and we will click OK. And now we've got a new set of tools here with which to work on our drawing. We have some drawing tools, creating vector tools. You can create rectangles, circles, stuff like that. We can draw those things out. One thing that you may want to use here is your text tool. Text is a little bit easier to add here as opposed to adding it within Fusion 360. So maybe you'd want to do some text and add it to your geometry. And this is where you would do that. Once we import geometry, we have some transform tools. These are your move, scale, rotate type things. Will be found here. We'll use one or two of those. And then some object editing. If you had multiple sorts of objects and you wanted to combine them or do things like that, you would be able to use these tools here for that. This one right here, we'll use the node editing mode. We can also access that with a right click, and I will show you how to do that. There's some more layout options here. It's things you can investigate if you want to. We're just going to pretend we've imported, or we will import some geometry from Fusion, and we're just adding it to this sheet. So something fairly simple, but something I think is what you will be doing a majority of the time. So in order to add our geometry to the sheet, we're going to come up to the top here, and we're going to look for this icon, Import Vectors. So go ahead and click on that. And it's just going to bring up the Finder so that we can look for what we want to import. So here's my DXF file. So we'll just click on that and hit Open. And here you can see the geometry is showing up on the screen. Now I can select everything and use these tools to adjust where it is on the screen. So I've got the Move tool here. So I'll just click on that. I can actually move it to specific positions by typing in some numbers here. If I wanted to go to the 0, 0 of this file, hit apply, it's going to go right to the center. I can also just hover over this line, get this four-sided kind of arrow thingy, and I can move it to wherever I want to move it. So you can be specific or kind of general about how you move this object around. Let's just be specific today, and we'll move it to the center. There we go. And we can hit close. It will come in generally some split geometry. So if I select this circle, for example, and I hit delete, just that will delete. I'm actually going to delete this guy. So you can do some editing of the file here too once you import it. When you're happy with where it is on your stock and everything like that, we're sort of done with this set of tools over here on the left side of the screen. And it's time to move over to the right side of the screen where we've got our toolpath tools. So we're just going to click this little arrow, which is going to kind of get rid of this side and open up this side of tools. So here's this arrow, click it. Now we've got our set of tools here. And we're just going to start in order here with our material setup. Definitely want to make sure our material thickness is 0.5. We're going to change our datum to the left side here. If I zoom out, I'm now making this our 0, 0 point. Material surface is our Z0. We want to make sure that's set correctly. And these two options we can leave as they are, the model position and material and rapid Z gaps. These are fine. And the home start position, just want to make sure it is 0, 0. That looks fine to me. And go ahead and click OK. Now we need to decide what kind of toolpath operations we want to work with. And so you need to kind of know how you want to cut this out. For this, we're going to just use the profile. We'll just use the profile cutouts. We can go into some more depth in another video of some of these other options here. But the majority of the time you will be using the profile toolpath. You may also be using the pocket toolpath. For example, if we were cutting this outside part out of the material we're cutting through, but we just wanted to lower the level of this interior area, but not cut it out, that would be a pocket, while the outside cut would be a profile. So it just depends on what you are trying to accomplish, which will decide what tool paths you're choosing. If you just want to cut all of this out, so you're going to cut out this line and then cut out all of this part, you just need to do profile cuts. So let's just start with this outside line. And we'll choose a tool path choose the profile tool path. And we've got some options here. So our start depth will be 0. Our cut depth will not be 0 because our material for this is 1/2 inch. And this matters because this is going to set how far down the cutting tool is going to go. In general, if I have a piece of material that's 1/2 inch, I will want to cut slightly below that to ensure we're cutting all the way through the material. So for a 0.5 material, we could set this to 0.55 or 0.6 inches. Let's do 0.55. Okay, so it's going to cut deeper than my actual material. That's going to ensure that I've cut all the way through the material. For this, let's choose 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch bit. And hit apply and select. So we'll use that 1/8 inch bit. Here, let's edit our passes. So this is telling me it's going to basically make 19 passes around here, dropping a little bit each time to get to my 0.55 depth. That seems like pretty extreme to me. So let's see here. We can set a pass depth, and I think we could do, let's try 0.0625. Whoops. And hit OK. See if that, didn't change anything. Let's see here. I'm just going to actually lower this. Let's go down to, so I want 0.0625. All right, so even 9 seems like a lot for this. 0.1 inches. Let's just say 4 passes here. And we'll hit OK. So that means it's going to basically step down a little bit, cut through this material, step down a little bit more, cut through, and do that several times until it gets all the way down to the depth I want of 0.55. So it's going to make a couple passes around this outside material. Now, so that's the tool and the passes. We're moving to machine vectors. Here's where you decide whether you want to cut on the inside of this line or the outside of this line. Or you could choose the center, but I almost never do that. So here, because the bit that you're cutting with has a thickness, in this case, 1/8 of an inch, that 1/8 of an inch cut is either going to be on the outside of this line or on the inside of this line. So you have to decide that. Since if it was on the inside, we'd be kind of cutting into this piece that we want to keep. For this operation, we want it on the outside because we're getting rid of whatever part is on the outside. That's not important to us. But this interior part is important to us. So we don't want the cutting bit to be on the interior of this line. So we're going to set this to the outside. Climb, as for the direction, is what we'll always choose. And we're going to add some tabs to this. The tabs leave a little bit of material so that this piece doesn't, once it cuts through, once it gets close to cutting through, it could start to shake loose within the material. So we add these little tiny tabs that connect it or keep a connection to your stock so that the object doesn't move around as it's getting close to the end of the cut. You'll see what that looks like in a second, but we're going to add these tabs. The length, we don't need these to be very big for this small thing. I'm going to say 2.5, and thickness, we'll say 0.125. That's fine. So we'll just keep it at that. Leads, we are going to do leads for this. I'm a big fan of leads, and I think we'll just keep this the way it is. Profile, we'll just choose outer profile. So I'll just go back here. For the leads, we just want to make sure we choose add leads. It gives us some options. Straight line lead. Usually this will say 90. We change that angle to 45, so it's a smoother lead in. And then the lead in length. This is a pretty short length, and I'm keeping it that way because we're going to need it to be short for these interior circles here. But you could make this a little bit longer if you wanted to. And you'll see what they look like in a second. So we'll go ahead and hit calculate. And so it's telling me that we're cutting deeper than the thickness of my material, but that's what I want. I want it to go all the way through my material and ensure that we're going to completely cut through. The tabs are going to keep the object attached to the material, so it should be fine. So just be aware that you will get this warning because we're cutting deeper. We'll go ahead and click OK. And avoid to add tabs, edit tabs. To add tabs to the selected vectors, use the edit tabs button. Okay, so this is telling you that we need to add tabs manually. So if we hit close, I'm going to go back and edit this and go to the edit tabs. And so here we can actually say how many tabs we want. I'm going to say, let's say 4. And do I want a constant distance? We can try that. And so you can kind of play around with this to get what you want. Avoid corners, that's a good thing. And let's click on add tabs and see what happens. So I've got some tabs here and here. We want to reduce the distance for those tabs. Let's just say 2 inches and hit add tabs. So now I've got a few more. So that's that looks a little bit better to me in terms of keeping this stable in the position we want while it's cutting out. So we'll go ahead and hit close here. So there are my tabs. Let's calculate again. We get the warning. That's fine. And let's go ahead and up here, we can kind of see what this is going to look like in 3D view. And here, if we zoom in, you can see the toolpath for the tabs. It's coming along, and then it's just kind of bumping up here so that it's leaving this material and it'll be attached to your stock. And so the object will actually be able to stay connected. And you'll have to go in and cut these out, but it's not very hard to do because we're just leaving a little bit. Here you can see the 4 toolpaths. So it's going to come in here, cut around, and then drop down and then do it again. And it'll keep repeating this until it gets all the way down to your desired height. So that's what these tabs are for. Here are your lead-ins. So it's just slowly coming in at that 45-degree angle, making the cut, and then leading out. And then it'll drop down to the next level. So that's our exterior cut there. We're going ahead and click on close and go to 2D view. And we'll choose profile again. And I'm showing you this because that was an outside cut. This one will be an inside cut. Because if we look at these lines and this interior part here and these circular cutouts, we want the bit to be cutting on the inside of the line and not the outside of the line. So we want to be cutting on this face, this part of the object here, because we're getting rid of this stuff, just like we're getting rid of the interior of the circle for this cut. So again, we'll start with our cutting depth. We'll make it 0. We'll choose 5.55 as the depth of the cut, just a little bit more than the thickness of the material itself. Our bit will be the 1/8 inch end mill. Let's go ahead and edit the passes, and we can change this to 4 and hit OK. Didn't do it, did it? Let's try that again. I'll just do it this way. Down to 4 and hit OK. So we've got 4 passes. We're going to change our machine vectors to the inside. So now you can see on the little diagram here, it's showing it's going to be cutting on the inside of the line. Let's make sure we're selecting all of these lines. So they all need to be selected. And let's see here. What else do we need? We need, for this, I'm not going to add tabs because the object from the outside cut will be held in place. We can do leads. So we'll do our same lead-ins. We'll keep this information the same. And I'm going to label this inner profiles, and we'll hit calculate. We're getting that same warning about the depth. That's okay. And it's telling us that the distance of our leads is not not enough for the interior circles, and that's okay. These are really small circles, so that's to be expected. It's still going to make the cut. Let's just change. I'm going to just turn off the outer profile so we don't see it and zoom in here. So here we can see the interior cut. You can see the lead-in here. You can see some of our lead-ins for the circles. They're just smaller, and the computer's done that automatically. And we can see that cutting bit is on the inside of the lines for both of these cuts, the interior here and these circular cuts, and that's what we want. And so that has to be separated out into 2 separate tool paths, our inner and outer tool paths. Moving on to kind of the final steps here. Once we're happy with the way this is looking, we're going to hit close. And it's time to post-process this. We'll come to the Save toolpath. We're going to make sure that visible toolpaths are going to be saved to one file. So we want to check this option here. And then just double check that these check marks of both toolpaths are checked, because that's what makes them visible. So we want that to be one file. Double check your bits. So just making sure you're using the correct bits here, and mill 1/8 inch and mill 1/8 inch. That seems good to me. So we just want to make sure that you have that correct. You can have different types of bits. So if one cut needed a 1/4 inch bit, the next cut needed an 1/8 inch bit, that's totally fine. You just have to change them during the cutting process, and the machine will actually stop and allow you to do that. It's smart enough to know that that's going to happen. So you can have different sized bits for different profile cuts. Last thing, we're going to come to the machine, choose our CNC router, and that's going to choose the correct post processor for us. Once you're happy with all that, go ahead and click Save Toolpath. We'll just call this router test. And click Save. Now, if we just open up the Finder window here, we can see that router test is on the desktop. And if I right-click it, if you want to take a look at it, you can choose Open with something like Notepad. And here you'll see it is just a G-code file with X and Y coordinates and Z coordinates. So that's hopefully what you should see. Once you've got this, then we are able to take a jump drive, load this into the router, and begin to do our cut on the router. There will be another video on exactly how to run that process. But if you have any questions about using VCarve to create a G-code file of your project and send it to the router, please let me know. Thanks.